that I now need to commit after writing the piece to then kind of condense it into this minute and a half bite-sized thing with maybe some photos and, you know, little video. It just kind of adds to my workload in a way that, you know, if you want the access, you kind of have to deal with. I do think it's easier for journalists to make that transition because so much of what we're writing is, you know, then having to just kind of be condensed and translated to a new medium. I think it's harder when a creator is trying to be a journalist, at least in the entertainment field. And that's what I'm speaking towards. I'm only speaking towards the entertainment field, because as we've seen, you know, a lot of these creators don't have the journalistic know-how. You know they want to talk to celebrities, or they know they want to be on camera, but do they know the ethics behind journalism? Do they know how to do investigative reporting? Do they know how to tell a story? Do they know about sourcing? Those things that, you know, there are things that creators do that I would never do as a journalist, just because that's not how we're trained. So I think it is harder for creators to become journalists, and they're certainly feeling that there is this us versus them mentality, because I know a lot of creators that go to events and they kind of stick with their clique. You know, they don't really talk to us writers because we don't often feel like we're in the same landscape.
Great. Yeah. Diana, what are your thoughts?
I definitely think that, well, here at Delos, we sort of had adapted that. We've adapted a way of collaborating with creators since the start of Delos, actually. And we approach it more as a collaboration, and we're very transparent upfront with them. You know, we talk about the ethics, we talk about how we're obviously, this is our video idea, this is the subject line, this is what we want. And they really just bring in the voice. And if they're open to being, if they're accepting of that and they're able to be flexible with feedback or whatnot, I think that's when it works. I know that there is a lot of debate with like journalism, right? If we're speaking just like on the newsroom side of things, I think that a way that the LA Times, at least right now, is managing that is by teaming up, you know, our resources. You know, we have video interns now helping out journalists and getting them on camera, and then they do all the work. You know, they just have them speak on the subject. And I think that's a great way to go about it. If we have the resources, I can see how that can add like a workload on a journalist. So, you know, on the creation side, and having to put content together and make everything look aesthetically pleasing. I do think that algorithms though are changing, and I don't necessarily think that you have to nowadays have a huge presence. I definitely think it helps, but I think that it's the algorithms are changing. You could have 1,000 followers and create a video and it go viral. And I think it goes back to consistency, right? Again, more workload on the journalists, but that's my take on that.
Yeah. And side note, Kevin did join us. So Kevin, welcome. If you want to go ahead and kind of give your spiel, let the audience know who you are, and everything, and then feel free to put in the chat where people can also find you after the call as well.
Perfect. First of all, my apologies. We had a power outage about 10 minutes before we were supposed to go live. So it just got up and running again. But my name is Kevin No. I am a former journalist, but I like to say once a journalist, always a journalist. I have been working as a marketing and branding strategist for the last 20 years, working with companies of various sizes, building a way for them to scale. And so I rely on storytelling as a way to connect with the audience and to grow and scale businesses, either for acquisition or for moving on from Schedule B to Schedule C as far as overall output. So that's my spiel.
But yeah, to just catch you up, I asked Diana and Kristen what kind of the whole like creator versus journalism debate and their thoughts on it. Would you like to chime in and add your thoughts in the whole journalism versus creator debate? Because I know you and I've gone back and forth on it a couple times on TikTok and everything. And I know you've seen like a lot of other conversations. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So I am a purist when I'm a journalist. And since our conversation transpired on TikTok, kind of done a lot more reflecting. And I think in the purest sense of journalism, taking out ratings books, taking out Nelson, what the truest essence of what we were supposed to do as journalists is to provide information that is reliable, that is factual, and as unbiased as possible. Now, with that being said, ever since we had the book, we had sweeps weeks, ever since we've had time where journalism has been marked by the number of eyeballs that are on the screen, we have been sliding into a slippery slope of catering into a bias, to a consumer searching out information that allows them to, one, feel good about their own ideology, to support the reasons why they believe what they believe. And so we've went into a slippery slope with that. I think content creation for information is a fantastic opportunity. My problem with it is at this point, when you are going and you are trying to get eyeballs on you, you're trying to get engagement, you're trying to get increase your number of followers, you have a tendency to put out information that is going to fit a narrative that your audience wants to hear. That confirmation bias. And so that's the problem I have seen, and that's kind of the red flags that I start raising when we see more and more independent journalists and knowledge creators come about. I think that I've seen a lot of great content creators start off fantastic, but then you start seeing them skew one way or another just because they've got to get that interaction. So that's one of my major concerns. Also, if you operate inside a newsroom and you are bringing a story in and you have an assignment editor, assignment manager that's filtering information in, you're a reporter that's bringing information, that's going to go through a series of producers, associate producers. They're going to read the copy. They're going to see if they can pick out things that either are not supportive, that you don't have enough sources on, or they see your bias coming through. With independent content creators, which are freelance journalists, we don't have that series of protections that are in place. And sometimes information gets to filter onto the web that hasn't been fact checked. So those are some of my issues. Now, I think it's a great opportunity to take us to places that we would never be able to see, get a different perspective. So I think there's a lot of wonderful opportunities, but I think we need to safeguard in some way some of the, I won't say gatekeeping, but some of the purest in the information trajectory.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective and everything. But I want to kind of dig into like kind of the confirmation bias versus like point of view, because I mean, I'm sure as everybody on this call has seen, like media, especially like a lot of these news outlets, or whether politics or perspectives, things are like there's clear biases that like things are shifting, like whether it's like, oh, you know, you have something like Fox News or NPR where there's clear that there's like a bias there and everything. But then when you talk about like content creation and even everybody as like a point of view, how do those things compare and how do those things differ? And Kristen, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, in the entertainment space, it's different because so much of what we're seeing now with content creators is paid marketing. And that's essentially, you know, what nobody really wants to talk about in our landscape, which is we're seeing a lot of content creators and influencers who are getting paid not just in you know, money, but in trips and swag and access to give kind of these really florid opinions. And they're almost always florid opinions. You know, best movie I ever saw. It's a masterpiece. And I think that consumers are starting to realize the falsity of that. They're starting to immediately find it suspect if a content creator is immediately coming out of the gate saying, well, I think this movie is fantastic. So, you know, it's been heartening to see people actually seek out actual journalists and actual critics to get that kind of unpaid for marketing perspective, you know, actually find out if a movie is good or not. And I think that that's kind of, unfortunately, in the entertainment world right now, what is the hope. You know, studios are so determined to kind of keep the status quo, keep the box office going, keep celebrities happy, that you're seeing this kind of, this world become smaller and smaller, almost like it was in the 1940s with like fan magazines, where you're getting X amount of content creators that have an established large audience and have maybe a tangential connection to film, but they're getting this access to Hollywood because it's just another way to you know, get butts and seats, even though no studies have ever been shown to show whether influencers actually affect box office. I think the only study that's ever been done is about gaming, and influencers only brought awareness to games. It did not turn into purchases. So I tend to throw that out there as like, it's probably very similar. And the problem is right now, you know, journalists are struggling to get jobs, to stay in the industry, to maintain access without you know, a big outlet. And so in my world, you know, with what I've done with the Film Maven, you know, I kind of have used that as an opportunity to be like, I'm going to be honest, and if I love something, I'm going to try to focus really hard on that. So, you know, if I love a movie, I'm immediately like, let me talk to whomever, let me try to, you know, actually sell this authentically. You know, and there are movies where, you know, reps and people will reach out to me and be like, you know, we'd love for you to, you know, review this or talk about it. And I'm like, if I don't like it, I'm not going to waste my time, you know. And I think that that's something journalists who want to be, you know, creators or create their brands, I think that's what people are gravitating towards: authenticity, not creator authenticity, which is now kind of going to the extreme of like everything's amazing, but just somebody that genuinely loves something or genuinely is passionate and angry about something. Because I think on the other side of that, when I write about how much I dislike something, people also, that tends to become a big thing.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Diana, what do you have to add here? I think you're on mute.
I think everything that Kristen said is pretty spot on, even on this side of things, right? When I start to see things like that, it's an automatically turn off for us, because again, you don't want to push a specific narrative, or maybe have the video creator, you know, give their honest, like, super, I mean, you know, their positive thoughts on something when it's not. So that's something that we definitely have struggled with, and like, and you know, making sure that when we are hiring creators, that they are aware of that, and they're aware that they don't have a say on like the voice. I mean, not necessarily the voice or the opinion, right, on the story, and they have to really let like the whatever it is, or the subjects, do the talking and do the leading of the narrative with that, right? Because I think that's where we're getting at with this. But yeah, I mean, spot on.
Yeah, and then Kevin.
I think one of the good points that was raised was the power of the voice of the average individual. I think that was one of the key elements that really projected success in TikTok or one of the other social media outlets. When we look at marketing research and we look at word of mouth and electronic word of mouth, we still see that has a significant advantage in getting consumers to act in a certain way. For consumer behavior responds to their fellow consumer. And when we have content that is being put out, you can tell is overly indulgent in whatever the product may be, or in the entertainment industry, whatever that outlet may be, I think it's starting to cause red flags for the average consumer, because their crack meter is detecting the same things that they did not like within broadcasting. Once they start seeing that transcend and go over to the social media realm, we're going to experience the same kind of issues. My advice to that would be remain authentic to who you are and what you are. Don't try to be something you cannot be, but give that honest opinion. If I am not a scholar in the medical field, I don't need to be giving medical advice. I can say, hey, this something happened to me. But I think the real struggle has got to be that line in which we guard and say, this is my lane, I'm going to stick to it. And if I stick to my lane, then I can remain true to who I am. And then I latch on to my individual believability. I think if we look at journalists, I pulled up one, Max Foster, who's with CNN. I think he does a fantastic job of giving information out. He likes to make these short TikToks. This is the summaries of what's going on. And he remains credible and believable. And I don't detect as much of a bias from him. So I think that's a fantastic example, but he stays in his lane. And I think that's for anyone who's using content creation in the industry that wants to latch on and utilize this as a tool. It's staying in your lane and getting people that want to be themselves and not try to be someone else.
Yeah. So then kind of piggybacking off of that, one argument that I've seen a lot for bringing creators into the newsroom is especially knowledge-driven creators, is they've built an entire platform around their expertise. Like they are known in their field for XYZ thing, whether it's science, technology, marketing, whatever that might be, unlike kind of like a staff reporter. So where can this be an advantage for a newsroom as like a collaborator? And then how about where this could be a disadvantage? And Diana, we can start with you.
I think the advantage there is obviously like they have their audience. They know how to package up ideas and push them out. I think that a disadvantage in the newsroom, or I don't think there's necessarily like a big disadvantage. I think that, again, if they're open to collaborating with the newsroom and our editors and our journalists on said topic, I think that we could really create something amazing, right? Like we have the resources, they have the creativity and the voice behind it. I think it's really about making the right choice when it comes to the creator, whoever it is that you're willing to collaborate with, essentially. Making sure that there's that line of transparency on both ends, and they understand that, like, at the end of the day, our editors have the last word on certain things, what's best for the story.
Yeah, I would throw out, at least in my case, marginalized communities. I think we've seen that there's a real backlash against that, especially in the journalism world right now. That one of the highest concentrations of people that immediately got laid off were women and BIPOC journalists. So right now, most newsrooms are very white male. And at least in my experience, the fact that I am a disabled woman is kind of been a niche that I think people are looking for. So, in my day job as a freelance, entertainment journalist, I mean, like right now, July is Disability Pride Month, and everybody is like, Kristen, can you write about Disability Pride Month? So like July is always a bump in time for me, because who else is going to write it that's not going to, get controversy for it. But at least with the Film Maven, what I've noticed too is that people want to read, kind of niche looks at pop culture, whether that's through a disabled lens or that's through a feminist lens. And, and people love to hate read that stuff too, which, they're still reading it. So I'll take it. And so that's kind of been something that I hate to use the word, but, that I've weaponized, which is, talking about these things that, on my newsletter, because I can write whatever whenever I want, I can be more timely on things rather than pitching it to an outlet and, having to wait, and maybe they come back a month later or they're not interested, so I have an ongoing series called Popcorn Disabilities, which is based off of the book I wrote. And, so like when Scary Movie came out, I was one of the only people to write about how that movie's disability politics was at odds with the original film 20 years ago. And I'm still seeing that pop up, on alerts that people are sharing it. So I think in my case, the fact that I I am a disabled person has been an advantage in writing opportunities. At the same time, being a woman and being a disabled woman means that getting, the few staff positions that have popped up over the last year, the landscape is still very much skewed towards white men. In 10 years, will we be saying again, where are all the women in newsrooms? Yeah, I think we will, because all of them have gone off and been laid off and have started their own thing and maybe don't want to work in newsrooms anymore because they're seeing, that there's a possibility to kind of make it on your own. That's something that I've thought about over the last year doing my newsletter. So I think that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, Kevin, what about your thoughts?
I think we've always used subject matter experts on news stories. We've always brought in professors or academics to speak to certain things. We've always brought in economists. So I don't believe bringing in creators is really any different than what we've seen in prior newsrooms. I think it's interesting if you look at Nature magazine, Nature, which is an academic journal. They recently had an article that was promoting academics and specifically scientists to start using short form video to start taking what was their content in their journal article, which really started from being a 150 page article or paper to a 20-page article. And now they're pushing them and saying you need to put this into a short-term video because that's how the educational consumer is consuming content these days. So I think this is just more of a transition of what we've always had. And I think instead of getting scientists from top universities, we're getting a knowledge creator that's just using a different mechanism to be able to get the information out. So I don't think that's a differentiation. I think the problem that we get into, and one of the drawbacks is, and I've seen there's a case out of West, I believe it was Utah, where there was an influencer who was being used by auto dealerships and some various other things. When they started researching her past, they found some very dreadful comments that she had made. Then it became an issue for the businesses that had contracted with her for her to be an influencer. So I think one of the things that we have to watch, if we don't have a vetting process, and I'm not saying that there's not issues with individuals in academia, but what I'm saying is there is at least some type of vetting process that gets them there. We need to be we need to be very stringent on the vetting process of who we put on air, because you get into two problems. You have a brand equity issue, because if you take a hit to your news organization, then you have a credibility issue. And then also, if you bring someone on board that is not reputable, well, you're linked to that individual. So I think we have to be very cautious so that we might downturn to that. But I think we've always used subject matter experts, and this is just a different platform in which that they can avail themselves.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point you bring up, which kind of moves into the meat and potatoes probably for the next 30 minutes on like how to actually partner with this. And I know, Diana, you probably have the most expertise on this because you guys are actively doing that. So I guess piggybacking off of Kevin's question, like how do you guys go and like find and vet these creators that you partner with at the LA Times?
So I have consistently been on social media for such a long time, and I'm constantly scouting and looking at consistency, right? Like, who is a creator that I'm drawn to? Why do I like them? And what kind of work are they putting out there, right? And so I found so many amazing people that way that don't come from, traditional journalism that don't have the traditional journalism backgrounds, right? And again, I'm speaking more on the creator side of things. Essentially, when we do hire creators, we try to keep it light. We don't really like to give them like heavy lifting, like reporting on certain things, because we like to keep that in-house. I think it's easier to flow nicer with our newsroom. But there are opportunities sometimes where we will hire from outside and have them collaborate with a reporter, And on that end, I think it's very important that they understand why certain things are in place and that at the end of the day, it's not about your audience, it's not about your engagement. It's the fact that whatever video you're creating, whatever content you're creating, at the very end, you're servicing the people. So, and that is where you want to just really keep it, based on whatever subject you're interviewing or what it is that you're showcasing through the set video, right? You leave it up to the narrative of what it's being built on, and not necessarily what you want the narrative to be, because not everything is positive, not everything is a good thing, right? Like, I think that is where you guys have mentioned, or the previous questions that have led to this go back to. But yeah, that's essentially how we do it here at Delos. We try to scout, see, vet, talk to them, and just really feel out the vibe and see, is this going to work for us,
Yeah. So what are some things that you're looking for? Like, is it like, I know you had mentioned earlier, like audience size, like is kind of irrelevant. So are you looking more like, are they like, what are the most important factors, I guess, when you're like, okay, like this is somebody I kind of want to reach out to?
I guess it just really depends on the styling of like their content, right? Like, is this somebody that would be great for a man on the street sort of type of videos, right? Or is this somebody that's great for storytelling? What is their focus on? Do they like travel videos? Do they like to showcase small businesses, on the local side of things? Like, it really just depends on their niche and what it is that they're doing, essentially. And the voice, right? Like, is this somebody that I can hire for a more serious tone video, or a video that needs pairing with like a journalist, right? Or is it somebody that can possibly curate like a series that is more entertaining and it's community focused? So
Yeah,
I guess it just really depends on, their niche, their consistency, just making sure that they're really owning in on the work that they're doing.
And then audience size, like, is that like a factor at all? Or is it more just about like the substance for you of like, okay, like, does this person have like good engagement or things like that?
No, it's the substance really at the core of it. I think that in their voice, right? Like, I think that matters more than the numbers. We've hired creators that have 1,000 followers and maybe less, and have now become consistent partners with us and have grown, into and are now possibly working with other media outlets too, because of the work that they've been, producing, and the fact that they're open to feedback and they're able to be flexible with certain things, right? I think a lot of them don't know that there's certain ethics behind being a journalist and videos when you're working with a legacy media outlet, but once they are open to those things, and they're noticing like, oh, there is these sort of guidelines that we have to follow, most of them tend to be very acceptable and just easy to work with. And if they feel like it's something that is going against, we had an issue. I'll give you guys an example. We had an issue with a previous creator where they were like, I don't want to touch this subject because it goes back to my their whole content, and it's something that could possibly hinder an opportunity down the line. And they can push back on certain things, and I think it's fine, right? Like, I think they're able to have like that free will to see, hey, we can't work on this. Actually, like, I don't feel comfortable yet, right? To be able to discuss something that has like heavy reporting or whatever. But yeah, just being very flexible on that end, I think, is the key.
Yeah. So I know we had taught, you pointed out to like kind of like learning those like best practices skills is like, and I firmly believe that there is like an opportunity for creators to kind of learn more journalism skills. Like, I'd love to hear from, especially Kristen and Kevin, like if you think like creators would benefit from like learning more of these skills, or you think it's more beneficial, and how newsrooms could potentially kind of help guide them in kind of learning some of these best practices if they are to collaborate with them. And Kevin, we can start with you.
I absolutely believe that creators could benefit, but I also believe it's It's twofold. So I love the fact that the ethics in journalism was mentioned, and you actually can go on to Society for Professional Journalism, and they list a whole long list of things that journalists should adhere to keep the respectability and the truth of journalism. There's twofold to this, I think. One, some newsrooms have become so corporate because of the mass, the number of consolidations that we have seen across the industry, which in my opinion is detrimental to the health of journalism, because independent journalists within a newsroom provide a much better vision and reflection of what the information is than someone who's being told from a corporate leader what to say. So I think that independent journalists and content creators remind journalists of what it means to be that person on the street and just to tell the story as they see it. I also think there are boundaries in the way we ask questions, what is acceptable, what is going to get you the next question answered that content creators can learn. So I think there's a split answer there. I think that we both can learn from each other. The newsroom is an ever-changing place. We have cut the number of journalists to a level of the fourth estate is under attack, but it's under attack from the corporate level. So we have to use someone to get the information out. Back to one other part, I think it goes back to expectation. So it used to be, if you look at journalistic history, when we provided content that was more editorialized, we labeled that as an editorial. We have blended what it means to be a journalist and an opinion journalist to the point that their line is so blurry you can't tell what programming is what programming. I think it benefits the newsroom, the content creator, to place a label on what they're giving. I think consumers of information respect if they understand what they are purchasing with their time and their energy. I think that's a bigger conversation, but I think if you are serious about delivering information, you need to learn the craft.
Yeah, Kristen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot in my day to day. You know, there's a lot of young people that are not going to journalism school and they're getting into content creation, but they want to be film critics or they want to be in the entertainment space, and they're butting up against the problem, which is that they're like, well, you know, I do stuff on camera, but I can't get a pitch sold, you know, and I can't make any money. And so I'm working, you know, and it's something that I offer as a part of becoming a paid subscriber to my newsletter, is kind of being like, well, I'll give you free mentoring, you know, one-on-one meetings, we'll learn how to pitch, you'll learn all these things. So, you know, it's kind of been something that I've been able to monetize my expertise to kind of help guide these young people to learning not just how to work the journalistic field, but to get paid for it. Because I think so many right now, you know, Kevin's completely right. The consolidation in the entertainment space especially is so devastating. And what's popping up in its place is these companies, you know, who shall remain nameless, but that are taking young people or taking people that don't have any journalistic experience and turning them into content farm writers, you know, that are just writing, you know, trying to hit a 2,000 word count to keep people on the site, giving them no feedback, no editorial oversight. And then when they're done with them, they let them go. And they're like, peace. And these people have been writing for the site maybe a year, maybe 6 months, maybe 5 years, and have absolutely no idea that that is not the landscape of being a journalist. And then they're completely adrift because they don't know what to do. So, you know, in my case, it's been something where, you know, I've definitely kind of been like, I have this expertise, I have this knowledge, you know, let me try to, you know, kind of use that as my brand, and also maybe help a couple people that are confused about what the landscape looks like kind of have a direction.
Can I add to that? I was here at the University of Florida talking to someone who's graduating this semester from their communication journalism school, and had a great conversation. We talked about how thrilling it is to do live TV and to be live on the scene. She had so much energy about the profession. At the end of the conversation, she looked at me and said, "But I'm not going to pursue it." And I was like, "Why? You've invested 4 years of your time, you've put in the effort," and it was the way the industry is shaping. The feeling that I have to have a huge following now to get, because it's the new resume tape. Your social media is the new resume tape. We've seen that with Kylan Darnell and her transition to SEC Network and to ESPN. But this individual looked and said, the way the industry is going, I don't see a path for me. And the comment was made earlier about women in journalism. 65% of all journalism students in the United States are women. If you want to talk about giving women a voice, if we are taking away these jobs and we are discouraging that when you leave university, there's no hope for you to get into the field that you got into, people who got into journalism like me that wanted to make a difference, wanted to tell stories that impacted our world, that brought us together, and we're no longer allowed to do that, we have lost a significant part of our culture, which is that story sharing, and will never look like what we once did or what we potentially can be. So as much opposition as I had on our original TikTok when we went back and forth, there is a place for content creation. I think we have to learn to partner more effectively and efficiently to keep that truth alive, but also embrace the rigor of I want to make sure the truth prevails and is heard.
I think the other
That's great. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I think
No worries. I think the other side of that too is that the unfortunate other side of that coin is that young people coming out of journalism schools or people that want to be, and I see this a lot in the entertainment space, content creators have kind of set up a bill of goods, in the sense that I talk to a lot of people that are in their 20s, that here I'm an entertainment journalist, and they're like, I want to talk to celebrities. I want to talk to famous people. I want to be on a red carpet. And I'm like, that's not what most of us do. You want to be a red carpet, pundit. There's a difference there. You want to interview people. I don't interview people all the time. A lot of what I'm writing sometimes is about industry trends and talking to business people and all of these things. And they're like, I don't want to do that. This influencer told me that I can talk to famous people and this is what the job is. And I think that that's the other side of it too, which is that content creators are not showing the hard work, of networking. They're not showing how you get in the room. They're not showing how you have a presence, or they're not showing what goes into kind of how the sausage gets made. And they're just setting up this idea. And I've seen the look of disappointment on so many young people's faces when I've said, are you ready to work 25/8? Especially, you're not going to make any money. You're going to have to live with your parents for a while like I did, and you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to network. You're going to have to be able to make a cogent argument. And some of them get discouraged just off of that, because they're like, I don't know if I want to do all of that. And I think that's the other thing. I think that there is also a responsibility on the other side of that for creators to kind of emphasize, like, we're the top 1%, at this point, like, millions of followers, going to parties, all of these things. They're the new celebrity, essentially. And I think, unfortunately, what a lot of young journalists coming out think is that they're not realizing that a lot of these people are also actors in a way. They're selling a brand, and they're also at the top 1% of what this industry can bear. And that means that everybody else is like the 99%. So I think there's a lot of misinformation being perpetuated that is causing a lot of people to come out of journalism schools really discouraged just out the gate if they don't make it quickly. I think we lost our fearless leader. We can take over now.
Well, I will say something while she is logging back in. What you said about pundits is exactly what needs to be part of the conversation. The difference between someone who is a content creator, someone who is a journalist, and then someone who is a pundit. And we have meshed those together, and they're not all the same.
Everything is kind of comorgified into one big ball, and I think, at least in my experience, that's coming from a variety of different people. I'm getting told all the time from studios and reps, like, well, it's your numbers aren't great on TikTok, we don't see you out enough. And I'm like, why do I have to document like what I'm doing in my free time? Like, I'm not selling an aspirational lifestyle here. But that's what, they want to be able to figure out that, you have this ability to sell. And I think that's the unfortunate thing. I write about this a lot. I do a series on my newsletter called Journalism is Fucked and We're All Doomed. And, talking about how, unfortunately, the belief is that entertainment journalists and critics need to be marketers. And we're not. That's quite literally not the fundamental of the job. Influencers are marketers, but nobody wants to admit that and say that they're marketers. So there's a lot of people, words have meaning. I think that's why we all get in this industry, is words have meaning. And I think that right now we're combining a lot of those words and not looking at how those are all fundamentally different jobs.
Great.
No, yeah, absolutely. Can you all hear me? I my internet just decided to drop in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anyway, sorry about that. But yeah, so yeah, I think like with storytelling and everything, it's been like a super big buzzword now. Like, and I think that's so on tech and independent journalism, and even in the corporate level, like the whole just aspect of storytelling. And I think, to Kevin's point, to kind of continue journalism as a thing, we need to like really like partner with and lean into the storytelling. So I guess what are some, since we have about 10 minutes left, what are kind of like some takeaways for people who are like creators who are wanting to work on this kind of partnership? What's the first move that they should actually make? And Diana, we can start with you.
I think being consistent with whatever it is that they're pursuing, right? Their niche, really understanding it, making sure that if you are, I think where I'm going with this is like, we have influencers and we have creators, and there's some people that are willing to put in the work and understand their subject matter and talk about their niche and go in on that, right? And I think that is what is first most important, right? Like being able to have a clear point of view, being able to have an expertise on a certain subject, and your professionalism really at the end of it.
Yeah. And then Kevin.
Excuse me. I take a little bit of a different path for this. And that's because I've had a weird trajectory vocationally. I think that for the news industry, and what was just said is absolutely correct. You've got to be consistent. You've got to have your niche. As someone on the other side of this who has a plethora of experiences, I'm an academic. I conduct academic research. I was a journalist. I worked for Congress. I have done political marketing. I have done business marketing. And I'm a huge person that looks at theory and sees how we can apply it. So who I am, and probably one of the reasons that I need to be consistent in this field, which I am not, is because there are people like me who have a wealth of information and have been told, you have to niche down, you have to niche down, you have to niche down. But I can't, because everything is like a pile of spaghetti. It all touches each other. Regulation is a driving force within marketing. Pop culture is a driving force within marketing and in journalism. Everything touches everything. So what I would challenge someone to do that wants to get into this is just start doing it and see where it takes you. Develop good editing, good concept of what good photography is. That's one of the things I hate seeing, is not understanding what lead space is if you're going to shoot video. Understanding that you need to shoot video the way that the mind works, We go from left to right, shoot your video from left to right, understand how it is to pan in and out to get to different various spots, understanding the technical aspect of the story. And one of the things that I had a photographer tell me when I first started one of my first reporting jobs was, everything you're going to say, make sure you have video for it. And write your story as you're shooting. Make sure you hear a soundbite you want to keep in there, you document it. But you hear a soundbite, then what's the video? What's the noise that goes with it? If you're wanting to create a package deal, those are the things. Making sure you have the concept, making sure you have the technical ability, and then just do.
Yeah, that's great. And then Kristen.
Yeah, I mean, also I'm understanding that, journalistically, journalism is a totally separate animal from, being an influencer. And I think we need to start delineating that more. I always say the fundamentals of journalism are being able to tell a good story. So read good stories, read journalism, read criticism, find what you like and what you don't like, and always have an authentic opinion. Understand that, at least in the entertainment space, celebrities are not your friends. Do not get into this job for celebrity and money. Also, I would say, like, if you're expecting to become insta famous or rich, no, realistic expectations. I think that's the thing. You're doing this job because it means something to you. And if that's, if you're looking for anything else, healthcare, stability, all of that, it's not going to work out. It's just not the right field. And I think being honest about that, I think being honest about where we are right now, understanding that, especially if you're a minority in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have to work 10 times harder to get half the respect. Yeah, it's depressing as hell sometimes. It's why I write a series called Journalism is Fucked and We're All Doomed. But when it hits, when you have a good day, it's the best day ever.
Can I add one more point to that? Find a group of people who are doing something similar to you that you can run ideas off of. If you're not going to have a newsroom environment where you have that someone challenging your thoughts, make your own group of people that are going to be interested in what you're saying, but honest enough with you to say, that's crap, do it better, or you know what, you're off kilter with that. And that's from influencing or on journalism. I think having a good source of a group to kind of your own group of colleagues.
Yeah, that's great. And I think community is like such a big one right now, not just because it's, a 2026 buzzword, but I think, just to have like more like-minded, like people to challenge us. Cause I think, sometimes our friends or family can challenge us, but professionally, like it's hard to find those people unless they're like a manager or something to be like, oh yeah, like, have you thought about this angle? Or have you considered like this perspective and everything. So that's a really, really great point to call out. If anyone has any questions that they want to add, we have a couple minutes left here. Feel free to put it in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and ask myself or our fabulous panelists. But yeah, is there any last minute thoughts that you guys want to kind of address to the audience here? I think this was a great conversation, and I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of this topic because there's so much to say on it, from like skills and the state of the industry, how to actually make these collaborations happen. But yeah, I'd love to hear any last minute thoughts anybody has, any of the panelists. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. The call has been recorded, so I will be sending it out in a recap email after the session. And thank you so much for Diana, Kristen, and Kevin. Your perspectives were amazing to share with the audience, and I hope everybody listening on the call really absorbed these nuggets of wisdom, and I know I learned some stuff. So yeah, feel free to connect with our panelists and everything after the call and whatnot. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.